I want to tell you something that I didn't understand until very recently, which is that grief doesn't always feel like sadness. Sometimes it feels like shame. And sometimes you live with both for so long that you stop knowing which one is hurting you. I'm 49 years old. For 16 years, I was a stay-at-home mom in Denver's Washington Park neighborhood, living in a beautiful old brick house with a wraparound porch we had renovated twice. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone's children went to the same private school, and everyone's husbands had titles like vice president or senior director. My husband's name was Desmond. He was the vice president of operations for a logistics company that moved freight across the Mountain West, and for 16 years, his income was the entire foundation of our life. We knew how to make struggle look like stability. That's the most honest way I know how to say it. The house carried 2 mortgages, the original loan and a home equity line we had taken out for the second renovation. We had around $40,000 in credit card debt spread across 4 cards, though I didn't fully understand how much trouble we were in because Desmond handled the finances and I handled everything else. Still, we took 2 vacations a year, a tropical island in the winter, somewhere in the mountains in the summer, because that was what everyone around us did. And if we stopped, people would ask why. Answering that question would have meant telling the truth, and the shame of that truth felt more expensive than anything we owed. Desmond's job had gotten harder every year. The company had been acquired 18 months before everything happened, and the new ownership had cut his department's headcount by a third while keeping the same targets. He was traveling more, Tuesday through Thursday most weeks, sometimes longer. He had lost weight. He had started waking up at 4 in the morning and staying awake, lying beside me in the dark. And whenever I asked what was wrong, he would say it was nothing, just a lot going on at work. That August, he booked our annual mountain trip. 4 nights camping in the San Juans near Telluride at a spot we had been to twice before. Our kids were 15, 12, and 9. Desmond planned the entire trip himself, which was unusual. Normally, I handled the reservations, the packing lists, the drive, the check-in times, all the little pieces that made a family vacation work. But that year, he took it all on. He seemed almost lighter while he was doing it. At the time, I told myself the vacation was giving him something to look forward to. Looking back, I think what I saw was relief for a very different reason. We arrived on a Thursday and set up at a campsite near a trail about 30 minutes from town. High alpine terrain, thin air, the kind of landscape that's spectacular and unforgiving in the same breath. The first 2 days were great, hiking, fishing in the lake, and kids exhausted and happy by dinner each night. On the 3rd morning, a Saturday, Desmond woke before the rest of us. This wasn't unusual. He often went for a sunrise hike alone. Said it cleared his head before a day with 3 kids. He told me he would be back by 8, in time for breakfast. He took a small day pack, water, a light jacket, his phone, which had limited signal up there, but he liked to have it. He kissed my forehead and walked out. By 9, I wasn't worried. By 10, I was. By 11, I drove to the ranger station. I won't go through the search hour by hour. I lived it that way once, and I don't have it in me to live it again at that level of detail. What I will tell you is the shape of it. San Miguel County Search and Rescue was on the mountain within 2 hours. By that afternoon, they had dogs. By the next morning, a helicopter was in the air. The trail Desmond had taken ran close to a steep drainage, a ravine that dropped nearly 400 feet to a creek below. The rock was loose. The vegetation was thick. From above, they told me, there were places so dense that even a helicopter could pass directly over them and see almost nothing. Within the first 48 hours, the working theory was a fall. The terrain supported it. His habit of hiking alone supported it. Because the weather had been clear and mild, they didn't think he had simply gotten lost and died from exposure. But a fall into that ravine, with the creek running high from snowmelt, was the kind of accident that could leave very little behind. Search and Rescue explained to me gently, in the careful voices people use when they are trying to prepare you for something unbearable. A body could be carried a significant distance. It could become wedged beneath rock. It could settle somewhere no one could reach. It could, in some cases, simply never be recovered. They told me this happens. Not often, but it happens. They searched for 9 days. Ground teams, dogs, helicopters, drones. Toward the end, they found nothing. No pack, no jacket, no phone, nothing. On day 10, the incident commander sat with me in the ranger station and told me, with real compassion, that they had searched every area where there was still a reasonable chance of finding him, and that continuing beyond that point was no longer something they could support with the resources they had. I drove home with 3 children in the back seat and no husband beside me, knowing that when we reached the house, his side of the bed would still be there, his things would still be there, but the life that held all of us together was gone. There is no clean way to tell the next 7 years. Grief doesn't happen like a story. It happens as a slow accumulation of losses that keep happening after the first loss, like aftershocks that never fully stop. The first thing that happened right away was the money. Desmond had handled all of it, and what I discovered in the weeks after was worse than I thought. The credit card debt was actually closer to $60,000. There was a personal loan I hadn't known about. The home equity line was nearly maxed. His salary had been the only thing holding the structure up. And the structure, without him, collapsed within about 4 months. I went back to work. Before I had kids 20 years earlier, I had worked in marketing, and I took a job doing office support for a property management company. Not marketing, not anything close to what I had done before. Just a job that would have me. We sold the house in Washington Park 8 months after his disappearance, at a loss after the realtor fees and the second mortgage. I moved to a rental in a town that was half the size, in a neighborhood where my children had to start over as strangers. My oldest, Tessa, was 15 when it happened, and 17 when we moved, and she never forgave me for the move. Not even now. Not because she blamed me exactly, but because grief needs somewhere to go, and I was the only person still there to receive it. The life insurance was its own 7-year nightmare, and I want to walk through it because I don't think people understand how this actually works. I certainly didn't, not until I had to live through it. Desmond had a $750,000 term life policy through his employer, plus a smaller personal policy. But insurance companies don't pay out simply because someone is missing. They require a death certificate, and a death certificate requires either a body or a legal declaration of presumed death from a court. Under Colorado law, which follows the Uniform Probate Code, that declaration requires the missing person to be continuously absent for 5 years. Only then can a family petition the court. 5 years. That is the statutory threshold. I want you to sit with that the way I had to sit with it. 5 years of being a widow who was not legally a widow. 5 years of having a husband who on paper was just gone, neither alive nor dead. Meanwhile, 3 children kept growing up without him, and the mortgage and credit card debt kept growing too. I filed the petition the month the 5 years were up. I assumed, naively, that things would move quickly after that. They didn't. The court required public notice to be published. Creditors and interested parties had to be given time to respond. Hearings were scheduled and then continued twice because of docket backlogs. The court also required additional documentation from the original search and rescue operation, which took months to retrieve from the county. The petition was not granted until the spring of year 7. And even after the insurance company received the court's declaration of presumed death, they didn't pay immediately. A claim like that, no body, only a legal presumption, triggers an internal investigation. They sent their own investigators. They interviewed me. They interviewed people who had known Desmond. They reviewed his financial records and the search and rescue documentation. It took another full year before they approved the claim. I received the payout in the spring of year 8, $750,000, minus what remained of our debts, which by then, after 7 years of interest and minimum payments I'd barely managed to make, had grown to almost $90,000. What was left was not a fortune, but it was enough that for the first time in 8 years, I could breathe. Tessa was in her last year of college. My middle son, Owen, was a sophomore. My youngest, Myra, was finishing high school. They were grown, or nearly grown. The worst of it, I told myself, was over. I bought myself one thing with that money, beyond paying down what was left of the debt and putting some away for the kids. I went back to Alaska, to a place outside a small town north of Anchorage called Willow. Desmond and I had gone there on our honeymoon, 7 days in September, before the children, before the house, before the debts. Willow is the kind of place that exists almost entirely because of sled dogs. It's the ceremonial restart point for the Iditarod every year, and the town, if you can call it a town, is full of kennels, some small and family-run, some serious competitive operations with 40 or 50 dogs. The package I booked was called Northern Lights Kennel, a mid-sized operation family-owned, that ran summer tours on wheeled carts and winter tours on actual sleds. I arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. The woman who ran the front office was named Diane. She was in her mid-60s and greeted me with a warm smile. Before the cart run, she gave me a tour of the kennel. The dogs were extraordinary. 40-some Alaskan Huskies, all bright eyes, wagging tails, and impatient little voices. Each one seemed to have a personality of its own. We lost our best handler a few years back. She said at one point, apropos of nothing, the way people do when they're showing you something they have built their life around. Best with the dogs I ever saw. Customers loved him, built half this kennel infrastructure himself. Those runs over there, the gear shed, the whole layout. We still run it the way he set it up. What happened to him? I asked, just politely, the way you ask things on a tour. Heart problem, she said. Sudden, about 2 years ago now. He was, mid-50s, healthy as anything. Just went one morning out with the dogs. Oh, I'm sorry, I said. We all still miss him, she said. His name was Des. Everybody loved Des. I want to tell you that something in me reacted right away. It didn't. Des is not an uncommon nickname. I know 3 other Des in my life. I said something appropriately sympathetic, and we moved on to the next pin. The cart run was 2 hours, 12 dogs pulling a wheeled rig through black spruce forest, the kind of experience that is genuinely, completely joyful. And for those 2 hours, I wasn't thinking about anything except the dogs, the trail, the view. Afterward, Diane invited me into the main office for coffee before my shuttle back to Anchorage. The office was a converted cabin, walls covered in photographs, decades of tours, mushers, dog teams. The Iditarod ceremonial start. Customers from all over the world holding up Northern Lights kennel banners. Diane was on a call in the back room. I had 20 minutes and a cup of coffee and a wall of photographs, and I did what anyone does in that situation. I looked at them. Most of it was what you would expect, but there was a section, older photographs, the kind that had been printed and pinned up rather than digital prints, that were different. I see a man, dark-haired, going gray, in his late 40s or early 50s, in nearly all of them, building something, a long, low structure that I recognized because I had just walked past it. As the gear shed Diane had mentioned, standing with the dog team, laughing, mid-motion, standing with a group of tourists, arm around someone's shoulders, the easy posture of a man completely at home. I stood in front of that wall for a long time before my brain caught up with my eyes. That man was Desmond, my dead husband. Older, heavier, in a healthy way, outdoor weathered, a beard he had never had, hair longer and gray at the temples in the way it hadn't been when I last saw him. But it was his face, the particular shape of his smile, the way he stood with his weight on one hip, a gesture I had seen 10,000 times across our kitchen counter in Denver. And then another memory came back with such force I almost couldn't breathe. Desmond on our honeymoon, standing near a dog team outside Willow, looking at Alaska like it had shown him something he wanted. I finally understood. This whole thing had not been random. He had not simply disappeared and found his way here by accident. He had come back to the place where our marriage began and built a life where I didn't exist. I don't remember sitting down. Diane told me later she came back into the room and found me in the chair by the window, and she thought I was unwell, and she got me water, and I sat there for what she said was almost 10 minutes before I could say anything at all. I told her, I don't know how. I don't remember choosing the words. I don't remember talking. But I told her that the man in those photographs, the man named Des, who everyone here had loved and lost, was my husband. Then I took out my phone with hands that would stop. Then I took out my phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and showed her the photos I still carry there. Desmond with the kids at Christmas. Desmond standing beside me on our porch. Desmond younger and sunburned and smiling into the camera like he belonged to us. I told her he had disappeared in Colorado 8 years earlier. I told her he had been declared legally dead 7 months ago. Diane's face changed in a way I will never forget. It wasn't disbelief. It was worse than that. It was recognition arriving all at once. The kind that makes old details shift into place and turns confusion into something unbearable. He told us he had never been married. She said quietly. Never had kids. Said his family was gone. Parents passed. No siblings. Nothing. Said that's why he came up here. Start over, he said. New place. No ties. No, he had 3 children with me, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. 3 kids, a wife, a career, an entire life. Diane looked down as if she was trying to line up the pieces in her own mind. He paid for almost everything in cash, she said slowly. For a long time, he didn't have a bank account here, not that any of us knew about. Eventually, he opened one, but that was years after he showed up. And he opened it under... She stopped. Desmond Carrick, she said. That's the name he used. He told us it was his name. We never had any reason to question it. Carrick was not his name. It wasn't a family name. It wasn't a middle name, or an old nickname, or anything I had ever heard in 16 years of marriage. It was something he had made just for himself. A clean name, a usable name, a name with no wife attached to it, no children, no mortgage, no mountain search, no death certificate waiting in a courthouse file. Just another thing he had built in Alaska, piece by piece, until it looked real. Diane drove me to the cemetery herself. It was small, a quiet plot outside a willow, where a handful of locals were buried beneath spruce trees, their graves marked with modest stones. His was simple. Desmond Carrick, beloved friend, gone too soon. Then the dates. The second date was from 2 years earlier, 2 years before I had even filed the petition in Colorado to have him declared dead. He had already been dead in Alaska under another name, while a court in Colorado was still deciding whether he was dead at all. I stood at that grave for a long time. Diane stood beside me without saying anything. He had been given 8 years. 8 years of a life he had built from nothing. No debt, no mortgage, no 4 a.m. staring at the ceiling, no 3 children whose tuition he was failing to pay. 8 years of dogs and mountains and people who loved him completely. People he had told plainly that we didn't exist. That was the part I couldn't stop coming back to. Not just that he had left us, not just that he had survived, not even that he had made a new name for himself and let us grieve him as a dead man. It was that he had cut us out like we had never been there at all. I flew home 3 days later. I haven't told my kids yet. I genuinely don't know what version of this to give them. Tessa is 23 now. Owen is 20. Myra is 18. They've spent 8 years grieving their dad, who died in a ravine. Their dad, whose absence was a tragedy that happened to him. I don't know what it does to that grief to learn it was a choice. I don't know if it's better or worse to know he was happy. I think eventually I will tell them. I think they deserve to know. But I'm still sitting with it myself, and I don't have anything wise to offer them yet. I keep thinking that he was good at building things. He built our life for 16 years, which is the part I can't get past. It wasn't that he was incapable of staying. He was excellent at it. But one morning on a mountain, he just decided to leave the life we had built together and return to the place where it had begun. I don't have a lesson for you tonight. I just have a grave in Alaska with a name that was never his, in the same place where I once stood beside him and believed we were beginning our life.